because I want to solve everything with yoga. So, you know.
Hey, you know, whatever works, and you know, kids are
I
going
got
to
a
get
pose
annoyed.
for that. You know, that's bothering you. I can help you with that. Yeah, mom. Okay, sure.
Right.
So,
And kids are going to get annoyed by parents no matter what you do, even if it's
bingo,
good for them or if it's terrible for them. It doesn't make a
bingo.
difference.
You know, if they're annoyed with you, fine, but maybe they take it into their own life a little
What about Kevin?
bit. Nah, he's probably the hardest sell.
Why? Like, does he give you some type of reason as to why
I
there's
talk
no?
too much.
So he lives with you, and he's like, "I hear you talk all the time anyway, so I don't need to hear
Yeah,
you
well,
talk for a yoga session."
I think it is a harder sell for some people, especially if they are more focused type A people that feel like sitting still is not doing something.
Mm,
So you have a harder time sometimes with people who feel that, you know, if I'm just still and quiet and listening to my breath, I'm not doing anything. And that's the first hurdle to get over. And there's
right.
just so many people who are so busy. And the idea of not being busy, they start to, I think, feel guilty, or they just have a hard time not thinking about what they have to do next. And that's really the challenge. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenge about any kind of meditative practice.
Well, and I think too, there's so many people just because of the way that our culture runs, you know, in this country, but probably around the world, you know, that just sitting still and not doing anything is one stigmatized as being like, what's wrong with you? Like,
Right.
why are you not doing anything and get to doing something? And so we, of course, I've said this to the kids before, you know, I think we overprogram our children, we overprogram each other. Like you always have to be doing, otherwise like you're kind of not contributing anything worthwhile. When the reality is that's just not true. And before like technology, you know, really came into the picture 20 years ago during my childhood, there was so many moments where you were just sitting kind of spaced out because you had to then dream up what to do next. And you needed that like transitional time of just kind of being alone or quiet. Like if your landline wasn't ringing, you were by yourself, or the TV was on, but then there was like 8 channels. So you weren't watching like all that stuff. YouTube didn't exist. So all those distractions weren't there.
Yep.
And so like that quiet time was kind of built into your life. And I know that you can relate to that. But today's day and age, it just feels it's so different. Like if you're sitting there doing nothing, we expect you to be doing something. And I think it's a problem, quite frankly.
Oh, I'm with you completely on that. I think my favorite time, one of my favorite times when the kids were small was actually long car rides, because I could take all technology away and we could either put on something on the radio they weren't as interested in, sometimes a book on tape, or just be quiet. And you have to do what? Look out the window, think.
Yeah. And I've been surprised, like Seth, we just did a couple of long drives recently during, you know, this COVID thing, just because we need to get out, but I'm trying also physical distance myself. And he's been a little bit more chatty and kind of like being my buddy. So I said this to myself, but like, let me give this a try. Let's go for like a backcountry little drive, you know, single lane roads, you know, not around anyone. And he was like, Daddy, look at that tree, or Daddy, look at that. And I don't know why I was surprised. I think pretty highly of him, but nonetheless, I was surprised in a great way that it reinforced what we just talked about, that, you know what, there are opportunities for kids to kind of get in tune and touch with those things without the distraction of tech. But we are just so used to, like, at the first moment of grumbling or complaining, it's like, just, you know, get that phone in front of his face, or just give someone something to do, because, you know, let's just quiet that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I think I really enjoy teaching kids. I mean, I teach preschool all the way. Don't have any high school classes at the minute, although I have in the past, through middle school at the moment. And it's different challenges. Little kids love yoga. Small children love yoga. They even love the breath stuff. So I'm doing a pre-K over the internet now on Thursdays, and all my kids show up and we have a really good time.
That's cool.
Which is really kind of fun. Yeah, developmentally, it's very interesting too, because there's a lot of stuff developmentally that has a lot to do with yoga. Some of the most basic, well, moves that you go through in yoga kind of mirror that going from a child on its belly to pushing to all fours, to pushing back, to straight arms, to trying to stand up. And there's a lot to that in working those kind of mechanisms. A lot of people will say, oh, look, my little kid is doing down dog. It's like, well, yeah, they're trying to stand up, but yes, it is down dog, it's
natural down dog, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's where it came from.
Natural child's pose. Look at my kid doing child's pose.
Look at that. Happy baby, little kid grabbing his feet on his back and rolling around. That's the kind of things we do.
Right. So with the middle schoolers, they obviously get something different out of it than the preschoolers, right? I mean, I would assume the preschoolers are getting a lot more like energy that's being displaced properly, where middle schoolers maybe are getting a little bit more instruction or getting in tune with themselves more than just the physical, or am I completely off base and there's no difference?
It's a combination. So the one thing when I go into schools, yoga for kids is a little bit different. And you have to be kind of careful with yoga because a lot of people don't even like you saying the word yoga when you go into schools. People aren't sure what it is, or it sounds vaguely religious or something. So sometimes we call it mindful movement. With kids, you're doing social emotional learning. So it's more them helping them to figure out how their bodies work and how they are in control of them. So I'll do things with small children that, will say, how do you feel when you're angry? Show me how you feel when you're angry in your body. And they'll go, right. I'm like, look, see how your shoulders are tight and your face, look at my face, it's all tight and my hands are tight. And then if I take a deep breath in, I can let that go. So just trying at a very young age to get them the idea that their emotions are not in charge of them. They are in charge of their emotions, and they can choose. They can choose how they feel and how their body is. Just like when we get angry, we get tense. If you can untense your body, sometimes you can get rid of anger and frustration. It goes both ways. Older kids still have a little bit of that. When you get to middle school, you might think that they're fully developed. The challenge with middle schoolers is that's a huge time of growth, physical and mental. So all of a sudden their bodies are kind of new to them again.
Yeah.
And so people always say, oh, my kid can't touch his toes. I'm like, well, no, your kid can't touch their toes because bones grow first and muscles try to catch up. So a lot of kids that have big growth spurts, they have tight hamstrings. They're just tight because they're being stretched. So a lot of them don't like to do a lot of physical movement because it feels weird, or I can't do that, or, all that kind of stuff too.
And that same mentality seems to play out with adults who are unfamiliar with it as well. I mean, I think as you and I have discussed once before, part of my apprehension when I've done yoga in the past or mindful movement is the idea of like, well, my joints hurt. My knees have been surgically repaired. My lower spine, has had a herniated disc. And so one, I'm afraid that I'm going to blow something out without like proper instruction. Two, I just don't feel the flexibility that I had when I was younger. So like, I feel like I can't physically do it, but I probably am just so far out of practice that it's preventing me from. But I assume like barring any major physical like abnormality or prevention because you just have, your body is just is wrong somehow. Anyone can do this, right?
Oh yeah.
And even if it's because there's steps, it's not like you just, like there's ways to introduce people without going full throttle.
Oh,
is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, so I always say yoga is about being flexible in your mind, not in your body. I mean, there are lots of typical things yoga teachers say. It's a practice. Yoga is a practice. I mean, there's another part of our culture that says you have to do it right. Well, what is right?
Yeah.
Now you have to, Brian, you don't have that at all. You want to be doing it the best. I want to be doing it the best I can and whatever. And, I'll always say you do your best for that day, for that class, for that time, for how you're feeling that day. And sometimes a pose might be one thing on one day, and it might be something else on another. The idea is that, you can be doing yoga if you're, sitting up tall and feeling your breath and noticing how that's making you feel. That's yoga. So,
okay.
That's the simplest part of it, is really being mindful of movements you take and doing it with breath. So you inhale to make a movement and you exhale to do another.
So the same way that I assume people would have to allow their bodies to not put a block in front of themselves, like saying, I can't touch my toes or I can't bend this way. The same way someone would be like, I'm going to not allow you to do that. I assume the same thing's true with the mental side. Like, I'm not going to allow you to kind of make me be quiet or to quiet this part down. I remember like when I was in psychology, and I don't know if there's any like true study to hypnosis or not with like any factual credence, but I remember that like a person came in to kind of walk us through the process of hypnosis therapy. And I was so resistant that I didn't even give it a chance. I was mentally combating like everything they told me to not let my mind drift off, to be really aware, because I wanted to see what these other people were doing and who was faking it and who wasn't. But I wonder, like within your setting too, are people just unable to quiet those voices to let themselves just breathe? Like I would assume not just physically, but mentally, that would be a handicap for lots of people to overcome.
That's the challenge between the middle school students and the adults.
Mm.
Middle school students, when I go in, I'm a class that they have to go to.
Right.
Adults coming to my class, you hope one of the reasons they're coming is for some, they want to try.
Mm.
That's kind of their goal. I know plenty of people who do yoga who also say they can't meditate. So it depends if they're going to separate out the physical practice from the mental one.
Mm. So if they do that, are they doing yoga correctly? I mean, not to put you on the spot and say to anyone who might be listening, like you're doing it wrong, but.
So yoga is a practice. For a great number of years, I did it as a physical workout, as I said, practice. That's an aspect of yoga. So are they doing yoga? Sure. Are they taking yoga to the fullest extent of what it can be? No, because this is the other great thing about yoga. And one thing I particularly like, there's always somewhere to go. This might be something that might frustrate other people. You never do a pose exactly right. There's always somewhere else to go. So, you can quote, oh, I got it. I got my, my arm back to where I wanted to, but then there's the next part of it. So the reason that, we practice physically is to get into our bodies and get out of our heads.
But I just wonder if you're really concerning yourself with your body as well as your mind and every other spiritual or emotional state or some bit of that, it probably affects the way that you look at diet, right? The way that you look at just like peaceful exercise for the rest of your day when stress gets to you, like how do you breathe and calm yourself down? It probably permeates more than just the hour session, right?
Oh yeah, in that if you keep doing it, I think that's exactly what happens. I mean, I could say that's exactly what happened with me. There is a whole second, they sometimes call it the sister science of yoga, called Ayurveda.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Ayurveda, and it's gotten to be a thing now. I dabble in it a lot. I really enjoy it. It makes sense to me. It's the lifestyle sort of aspect, what you were talking about with food, and sort of how you start your day, like your daily routines to some extent. What I like about the whole yoga and Ayurveda and the whole system that makes such sense to me, it's so connected to the rhythms and the cycles of the earth.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, is this bordering on like that vibration type stuff? Like you being in tune with you put good energy out there and good energy will find you type thing? My
Uh,
wife's big into that. And
I'm an energy worker too. So yeah,
okay.
you know, it once again, the more you get into this, the more it pulls you in those kinds of directions. I'll admit it. I got my crystals over here, you know.
Yeah, we've got crystals up in our kitchen.
You know, and I find something to it. And I think it really is more that becoming more aware of an environment, and instead of just being beings on this planet, realizing we are as much a part of this planet as anybody else. And that's what the Ayurvedic system goes into. And you know,
so I mean, besides permeating everything else, this is like a precursor to get people on the climate change. I mean, like I know I'm like kind of joking, but in the sense that if you really are in touch with not just yourself, and being at peace with yourself, but being mindful of yourself, but probably others too. But now you add this whole other dimension of being attuned to the world's needs, not just like the poverty that you see and the social issues, but also just the natural like current. I would have to say I mean, it would strike me as peculiar if someone did yoga and was really into it and also kind of didn't want to have any type of conservation or preservation methods like in their life towards the earth.
It would be pretty much impossible, I think.
So let's get everyone doing yoga then.
Yeah, well, hey, come on. Yeah, I'm into it. Let's go. Bring it all in.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And animals, you know, an animal goes extinct. Well, what happens to that environment? I don't know if anybody ever paid attention to, like, you know, the whole thing about the wolves coming back to Yellowstone.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you take one piece out of the puzzle and what happens? And we sometimes have this idea that we're just not part of the puzzle, like the world and everything else is the puzzle and like we're not part of it. But
well, and I mean, what a great skill to have in your toolbox too during these days where, I mean, it is quiet already. So people are kind of being bombarded with like, I need noise. It's like everything's too quiet. But the idea that you can also shut out all that negativity and dread that obviously is seeped into every one of our, you know, households, our families, our loved ones, just the uncertainty of it all, to be able to put your mind really almost in a different space where you can kind of come back into that reality, because it's not like I think you're avoiding reality, you're coming back into it, but with a better sense of like peace or positivity or light. That's going to be the stuff, if this really drags on for months, which it looks like it will, that I think hopefully will keep a lot of us sane versus like the real psychological trauma of people just being inside, detached, like just losing their minds, you know, and going crazy. If you can have some skill that can kind of center you and reset you, I think it's invaluable probably at this time, even more so than before.
I would agree. I mean, all we really know about is now, this second. Okay, that second's now gone. So all I know is now. All I know is now. How can I truly be in the now?
Right.
And when I work with kids, I talk to them about, you know, if you're thinking about the past a lot, you can't do anything about the past. It's gone. When you dwell on the past, that tends to be depression. If you're thinking about the future all the time, can't do anything really about that either. I think, to me, the biggest thing about this moment in time is that those blinders have been taken off, that we have control. We don't have control. We think we have control. But if you're spending so much time thinking about the future, what's going to happen in the future, you don't know.
Right.
So it's about bringing yourself to the present, bring it to the moment, being right there.
And that's so helpful. I mean, especially I think because the people who are going crazy already in the first couple of weeks, and I've had a couple of those moments, have been precisely because of what you've talked about. We're so past oriented, yes, and I can get to that in a second, but future oriented, and to have plans and schedules and things that we look forward to, and our whole life is situated on that and goes by that flow. And to take all that out and to put a massive question mark about, we don't even know like what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone next week, let alone next month. I think that's crushing a lot of people because they have the inability to kind of be okay in the now. And the now kind of right now is dark too, but to have some ability to say, I can't control that and I can't affect what happened before, but I can only process it healthily and adjust and be present is such a helpful thing. And I think, as we transition in this next 30 minutes, I think what's also interesting is you work with young people and super young people, but the philosophy that you've espoused in the last 5 minutes is so perfect for older people, young adults and ancient people, because so much of our life becomes baggage, things of the past, or the fear or the dread of what comes next, and that happens every decade. And so it would probably be helpful, not just to the little kids and how they displace energy properly and get all that stuff out, but also for me or 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, to have them be able to be well adjusted in whatever time they find themselves in, so that the past is not constantly chasing after them like a demon or a ghost, and that the future doesn't just so petrify them about not knowing what comes next. And not just COVID stuff, but also death stuff if you're super old.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, honestly, a lot of people would say that all of our anxiety has to do with the fear of death.
Right.
What's that going to be? But it's very interesting. I agree with you. It certainly is helpful for anybody. And the other thing I think to make clear to people, I sound really with it right now. Oh, she must have no problem with this whatsoever.
It's all an act.
No, but it's a practice. It's a constant practice. Do I get nervous and anxious and what are we going to? Absolutely. Do I think about, why did I do that? Constantly. But I'm going to let that go now. I'm going to come back to just thinking about how my breath feels. And it can be really hard to do. When you first start, it's really hard to do. Some days it's really hard to do.
Right.
But that's it. It's just a matter of, just like you train your body, train a bicep or you train whatever else, you just train your brain to come back to the thought that you wanted to have. And so when I do simple meditation, the thought is, how does it feel to breathe? When you breathe in and breathe out. And that's what you're thinking about. And just letting the other thoughts come in, but then letting them go.
You mentioned before practice and stuff. So in the time that we have left, what do you want to, or how can you help us? And I, by the way, am a complete novice with no experience, minus the 3 things I've done at church with you or Katie Connolly. And I went one time with my wife to make be a good husband. And I became a bad husband when I complained. And that was, and she's like, I'm not taking you again. And we both achieved our goals at the end.
Yeah, that's it. That tends to work out that way. Uh-huh. All right. Well, maybe what I could do is just show a few things physically.
Sure.
Do. And if you want, we can do a quick 5-minute kind of meditation.
Let's do it.
All right. So just starting where you are. So I've got a chair here. I would suggest that you sit at the front of your chair. Okay. So a lot of times we sit way back and we lean back against the back. So sit up so it's your spine holding you up. Okay. Mm-hmm. And feel your feet on the floor. And feel, I call them your sit bones. So the bones in your butt that are sitting on the chair. Just feel into that. And try to lift your belly button up and in a bit. And that's going to lengthen your back a bit. Okay. And then just to relax your shoulders or get our shoulders, let's do a couple shoulder rolls, bring them up to your ears. And then roll them back and down. Bring them up. Roll them back and down. Bring them up. And roll them back and down. And then turn your palms forward. Let your shoulders go down. So just the act of turning your palms forward rolls your shoulders back. And then if you keep your belly button kind of lifting up, so there's a little bit of action around your core and you're just lifting your spine tall. And then you want to think about your ears being over your shoulders. So if you feel like your head's forward a bit, maybe draw it back a little bit as you draw your shoulders back. And then take a big breath. And just that X. So you can do that sitting or you can do that standing. Same idea of just lengthening your spine. Then just move your arms a little bit. So arms are really in line with our heart and our cardiovascular system. So even if you're sitting down, you can inhale. And I'm going to reach my hands, I don't know if you can see, but I'm putting palms up. So reaching my arms up overhead, but I try to keep my shoulders down away from my ears. Okay. And then as you bring them up, reach through your thumbs, like you're lifting your thumbs up, pull that belly button up and in. And where I hope you're feeling it is along your sides, like your ribs. That's where you're lifting from. A lot of people will lift their arms up and do this and have their arms and their ears together. So just you can have your arms even wide. They don't have to go far. Some people have a harder time keeping their arms close. They can have them wide. So just lifting up. Taking a big breath here, keeping those shoulders down, collarbones, if you feel your collarbones, keep them wide. And then exhale, turn your palms down and bring them down. Okay, and if we do that with the breath, it's an inhale up. And you can even look up at your hands. That's going to stretch your throat a little bit. And then exhale, draw the hands down. If you want to bring a little bit of more energy into it, you just have a little resistance with your arms. Pretend you're kind of swimming through peanut butter. So you inhale up and look up and press down into your sit bones where you're sitting. So you're lifting up and pushing down at the same time. And then exhale, bring the arms down.
That's pretty cool.
And it really helps with your breathing too.
I mean, and I have horrible posture. I mean, I go from probably being like 5'10" to 6'1", you know, when I finally do lengthen properly. And, you know, I've had like Norm Herkin and people work on my posture, and it's a constant reminder that I have to tell myself. But, you know, if I had a practice and a discipline that even when I sit, because this chair is like so not good for it, it's like lean back.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like doing that at the end of my seat, it's like I'm already above my camera screen. Like I just feel bigger. So that's and it's so. I mean, I don't mean to say it's simple as in what you taught us is not instrumental, but for me, like this is a simple practice that I can employ when I'm sitting here at my computer desk.
Right, and it's the mindfulness of the movement. I could say sit up tall, but when you say like pull your belly button in and you pull your shoulders back and you roll your arms forward, we'll see what I mean? This is all these instructions that some people don't like. And then you inhale up and exhale down. The other thing I'll tell you, if you want to think about it this way, I'm going to turn this way in my chair. So we've got flexing muscles that bend us forward. And we've got extensors. So this is me flexing my arm and then extending it.
Right.
Flexor muscles, things that pull us in like this, are stronger than extensors. So if you think about your shoulders and your spine even, these muscles, so much easier to fall forward, right? And roll everything forward.
Oh yeah, totally.
And this, pulling back, if you feel your shoulder blades, and you always feel like you want to pull your shoulder blades together. Sometimes I'll say, as if I gave you a pencil to squeeze between your shoulder blades. And you hold yourself back. So we can feel where the back of our bodies is generally weaker than the front.
I did physical therapy. Because I had a herniated disc in my L5, L4. And she was like, you're so healthy in so many respects, except your back is so incredibly weak. Because like some of the things that we were doing, which is not so dissimilar to even just what you did right now, it's like I can do so many things like biceps, and I'm not muscular, but I can do some things that my strength is in my upper half. But my back, it was almost pathetic, I felt. You know, when I just couldn't do things, I'm looking over and I see like Ethel doing them right next to me. And I'm like, geez, like I need to really take care of it. But I think you're right. I think so many people don't even pay attention to how weak their back is, either through poor posture, I assume, or just not using the right muscles when they bend or when they pick things up or anything.
It's a lot of things. We are a culture that sits. Sitting is like the biggest thing. And I mean, once again, I can go into that for a long time, and how your psoas gets shortened and your hip flexors get shortened, and it pulls you down like this. So then when you stand up, you get sciatic, you get low back pull, all this kind of stuff. Sitting has a lot to do with it. But breathing also. So this is why I'm such a big proponent of breathing. Your diaphragm is attached in the back here, comes right around here under your ribs. So when you inhale, so if you think about it as a pancake that's kind of cut through the body here, when you inhale, your diaphragm drops down. So that's why your belly goes out. When you exhale and you pull your belly button to your spine, your diaphragm pushes the air out of your lungs and pushes up. Well, that's massaging a lot of these back muscles at the same time. So deep breathing is actually a way of working back muscles and loosening up your back in little incremental ways. And then going back to what we were saying before about, you were talking about, climate change and the planet, right. And how we're all connected. Our body's all connected too. So a strong thing one place and a weak thing another is going to cause difficulty.
Sure.
It's going to, you're compensating. And so when we're not balanced in our bodies, things start to go out of whack. And that's really, one of my teachers long ago said to me, I never got this, yoga's good for everything and everything's bad for yoga. So if you're a tennis player, you're using one arm pretty much and you're swinging this way. Even a golfer, always doing one way. We never do anything in yoga to one side that we don't do the other. So we balance front and back, we balance side to side. And any other sports you do, with the exception maybe of walking, if you're using your arms too, when you walk, that might be why walking's so good for you. But most other sports make you use repetitively certain parts of the body more than others.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we're also working on.
I mean, that makes so much sense. And to have balance, what a great thing to do, and to have not just in your life, like emotionally, but also in your body. Because as someone who has had a share of injuries and is now 38, and I know that's not ancient or old by any stretch of the imagination, like I feel those
compared to me, but
like I feel those tugs and I feel those pains and those aches, especially after a day with my 4-year-old, where all of like, if you taught me an hour and I left and I feel so good, but then inevitably, like playing sports is like almost the equivalent analogy of doing something with my son, like using all these muscles, and probably wrongly, because I'm chasing after him and I'm not being mindful of how my body's acting. I just think it's really important for all of us to remember that balance is as crucial as getting to like a certain rep up here. And no matter how strong you are in other areas, if you're weak in tendons or your back, those things could slow you down, and you could look like an Adonis, and yet you can be in the infirmary.
Right. Well, and that's why so many sports figures get hurt.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, people are like, well, wait, they're getting all this great physical exercise, but they're using more one thing than another. And so that's what causes an Achilles to go, or
this analogy is gonna be so lost on you, and if anyone does listen, no one will know what it says. But there was this football player named David Boston years ago that my brother and I, like, this guy was huge, a wide receiver thing for the Cardinals, like the biggest muscles anyone's seen, like just tall, thick in sense of just strength.
I remember the refrigerator, so
maybe. Yeah, right. Well, this guy was not fat. Like, this guy had all muscle, and yet he was injured all the time, and it felt like his body just couldn't compensate for like the muscle mass. It was just peculiar to see someone so huge, but that was me as a young person. I couldn't get it. I didn't understand why someone so muscular, so like out of a movie superhero, could always be like on the sidelines with a nagging injury. But this seems to make sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it is. I mean, football players too, they take a lot of abuse. But
yeah, of course, like car wrecks.
Their joints are so, you've got a lot of muscle, but not at the joint. That's your vulnerable place. And, somebody takes your knee out,
Yeah, right. So the cool thing too that you've said so far, like if someone in Normandy Farms, were to watch, I mean, just the act of sitting, let alone, or breathing, as you've said, it doesn't mean you have to have a mat, and if you have to get down on the ground. And if you can't do that, okay, you can't do that. but here's things that everyone literally does, unfortunately too much, as you said, sits and breathes. Breathing is not too much, but we can work on those two things.
Well, the other thing I'm going to say to you is that this is my other feeling is that the body naturally wants to be balanced and wants to be well. And so there are natural things you do. I mean, most people, like at some point, you know, if you're sitting a long time, you'll go, oh, you know, stretch yourself out. Like it's a natural thing. That's what we do. So a lot of simple yoga things can seem like, oh, well, I do that all the time. I have a lot of people that's like, I'll give them this one pose. It's one of my favorite poses for like when your low back goes out, called half frog. And people will go, oh, I sleep like that. I'm like, I bet you do, because while you're in your subconscious state, your body's like, I need to relax that muscle. Let me move myself into a particular place to do that.
Like sometimes when my back hurts, I walk and the youth group makes fun of me because they say I look like an old, you know, man. I walk with my hands behind my back. Yeah. And I see it's like, well, I'm just doing it naturally to probably alleviate pressure down there, right? Because that act of
you're pulling your shoulders back.
Exactly.
Alleviating something. The other thing I would say is, once again, every time you pull your belly button in and draw yourself up, that's when you make space in your low back. So this, pulling your arms behind you, gets your upper back, but pulling that belly button in will get your low back. And I mean, this is probably, I can do it this way.
Yep.
So if I'm standing like this, a lot of times we kind of do this and we, hang in our low backs. So all this is pulling my belly button in, and I stand up a little straighter, and it lengthens here. And also the front supports the back. Right. So if this is weak and you have a weak gut, think about you're weak all the way around. So if your core muscles aren't as strong, if nothing is supporting that low back, and the low back, when we pull anything up or stand up, the low back takes so much of a load. Right. That's why the core work and stuff is so important, because it just helps support that area. There's no bone, you know, think about it, there's no bone there. There's only the little spine. You've got your hips and your ribs and all this space.
It's so, I mean, it makes everything now is like jigsaw piece, like puzzle, like coming together. And
that's why, it makes sense, right?
Well, yeah, because too, like when I did that physical therapy, it made no sense to me at first. And again, this was just pure ignorance, why they were assigning me planks. Because at that point I just heard like kids like planking. It was like a meme. You're like, oh, what is this ridiculousness? Kids planking in photos. And they're like, go home and do some planks. I'm like, planks? But clearly she said the exact same thing, you know, and this is probably common sense, but it wasn't to me. Like just your core in the front is as important as the L4, L5 that we're working in the back. And those planks were the hardest things I've done. They were much more difficult than push-ups and all that. It was like, I felt like I had a huge workout for just doing like 60 seconds of that stuff.
Well, and the other thing is, I always say that when I have people in class, especially new people, I always wish I could put curtains around everybody so they could see me and not each other. Because, you know, you're in class and you're next to, I mean, even if I use, you know, you and Kevin as, you know, you've got different body types.
Totally.
And the pose in one person isn't going to look like the same pose in the other person. And you've got, you know, maybe some injuries, you might have others. Like, people look different and everybody's trying to do it right. And that's that other thing, that being in your head and looking out of your body rather than into you and what feels right and what's right for you. That's the practice. That's really the whole practice, is just finding what you need in here and listening to in here, rather than, oh, I'm going to go online and figure out how to fix me.
The cool thing,
you do know kind of how to fix it.
I mean, the great thing that you've done so far is like where we started 50 minutes ago was like people get a little bit unnerved when they hear the word yoga because it makes them think of religion.
Yeah.
Well, Well, everything you just said is like religion. What we teach, what I do with, at least the young people with my job is like, let's work on this so that you can be okay. And especially with like Instagram and social media culture, the same thing you just described in terms of like putting a curtain in front of people when they're doing exercises so they can be focused on themselves, because what you can do is different than what other people can do. And don't always use like that person or that person as like the measuring stick. And it's so hard, I think, especially for young people and probably more for young girls, when all you're looking at constantly or bombarded with are pictures of probably fake lives and ridiculously toned bodies, or like lots of make, whatever it is, and you're looking at yourself and you're feeling much worse about yourself. And I think it's so much harder for them than it was for even my generation, because though there were those people that you looked at, you kind of envied in school, you also weren't like blasted with it every time you did anything. And because they do so much of this, they see all that like curtain down thing that you were describing all the time, and they're measuring themselves up all the time. And so what a great thing that would be, practice for their whole life, to always kind of be able to say, as you've said so far, live in the moment now, be okay with who's in like this box, just you, because that's going to make you okay with everything else, like your neighbors, your strangers, and the whole world at large. So like this is in some sense a religion in the fundamentals of how we go about our business at church. And I love that you can sync both together and have them be perfectly symmetrical.
Well, I'll tell you. Well, first of all, just to be clear, yoga is not a religion.
Right.
Not a religion. Comes from a country where they have a different religion that sets up their culture. So the stories and the words and everything are coming from that place. And yes, there are nods to gods and goddesses, but it's more like we use them in the Bible. They're lessons. It's not that you're supposed to be worshiping anything. But the funny thing is, when you talk about the kids, I'd say the biggest difficulty that you have when you're dealing with kids, and you may find this too, is while you're right, it would be great to inoculate them early and have them just be able to be in themselves and all that. But then there's developmentally, they're not in that space. All their drive is to be together, listen to each other. How do I become one of the group? And that's where they are. So yoga is a real difficult thing for them sometimes, because it's saying the opposite. And while they might hear it and kind of know, oh yeah, I'm good and I need to be how I am and not worry about other people, like they kind of know it, but everything else in them is telling them the opposite. So
totally. Yeah, I've experienced that a bit, where I felt like, man, I have just hit a home run sermon or a great lesson, and they're like, oh, that was great. And then like an hour later, I'll get a text, from one of them, or like some news later in the week that they did something that's so counter to everything I just said. Like, what were you thinking? And like, but it's a good reminder. And I try to remind myself always, like, I was once that age, they are that age, and developmentally, they're just not where we are and where a 25-year-old would be. It doesn't mean that you infantilize them and you basically, think nothing of them to demand anything of them. You nudge them and you push them and you guide them and you do the best you can. But you also, I think, have to recognize that their space is so radically different at that developmental point in time than our space.
And as you keep pointing out, not just their space and their developmental space, but the world that they are experiencing that space in.
Right.
So different from the world we experienced when we were in that space.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's
100%.
And everything too.
Oh, I know. I've had arguments at Bible study with older generations about, like, yes, the problems are the same, maybe in name, like peer pressure and those things, but there's a whole difference that exists because of just the day and age that we live, the speed at which we operate, the society that it's globalized, expectations, the fact that, like, yeah, great, you're going to go to college and there's a massive debt. I mean, we can go on for hours about all the extra pressures that they have that I didn't even have. And that was, not very long ago.
Agreed.
That's right. Yeah, that's how we should just breathe and be at peace. But Amy, this was great. And obviously, hopefully the first of several more to come. But thanks for this.
We can do some more chair kind of stuff where just simple movements here, simple movements where you don't have to get on the floor to, you know, other things as well. And, you know, I've got stuff on my website if anybody's interested in that.
Yeah, give me the information maybe at the end of this, and I can like send me an email and I can put those like plugs, like your business card or your information at the bottom or the top.
Just what I decided to do was I just decided to put something up there once again to give people a little bit without me taking a full class. So what I have up there are 10 minutes, 5 minutes of movement and 5 minutes of meditation. Sometimes I run over, but I'm bad that way. But I try to make them kind of simple, and I have a bunch of different ones up there. So
cool.
No, it's just, they're free. They're just to go use.
You're doing the Lord's work, Amy, or at least the earth's work.
Well, and just I have to tell you, Brenda, there's one other thing just to say is, going back to the whole like yoga religion or anything like that. My own studies in my first teacher training, my second teacher training, the other trainings that I've done, the meditation, if anything, it simply made my religion, my understanding of my religion just clearer. It hasn't warped it in any weird way. It's just made it, it's just made it so much clearer, because the central channel kind of thing in yoga, honestly, you know, we come into the moment and that connection is love. And that's what, you know, brings us up. So I can be sitting in church and I'm like, oh, that's yoga at the same time that you're giving, you know, that fabulous sermon where you knock it out of the park. You know, I'm like, yeah, I could use that. I could actually use that in my class, and vice versa. Like you hear it better. It's another way of hearing it. And, you know, you kind of, I don't want to say I hear it with my whole body, because when I'm doing asana and actually practicing and moving, but yeah, you kind of do.
I think that's so cool. I think
that way.
That speaks to the whole spirituality of that. You know, I think hopefully churches do well is that there's multiple angles to get and approach the divine, and so it's not that they are at odds. It's just something else that adds to that whole feeling. That's great. Well, Amy, thanks again. I'm gonna go have dinner with my son, and you give.
You did dog with him. He'll show you how.
Thanks, and you give my love to your whole family. Okay.
Will do. Right back at you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.